Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Tonight is Tuesday, 6 p.m. Thanks for coming early, everyone. It is November 4th. We are super excited. It is the first week right after our state meeting on Saturday. I want to say a couple thank yous to that. First of all, the church, the Montview Presbyterian Church, did a tremendous job hosting, being the venue for our site. They were all super helpful, all of the staff there, the venue, the location, such a great place. It was a really nice venue, really nice people helped us out. The Mile Hive Bee Club, what great folks doing a tremendous job picking up and helping out whatever. It ran so smoothly because so many people there were just wanting to help out. It was great. My board helping out did a tremendous job. That was so great having all those folks help out. And the guests that we had, Jeff, we had four guests come in for our state meeting. We had Corey Stevens as our keynote speaker.
What a
We
great
had
guy.
Rogan Tokash, who just graduated from Auburn and now has an assistant professor position up in North Dakota. We had Steve Genta from the North American Honey Show Training Council, as well as Heather Cherry for our honey show from the same organization. So thank you to all four of those for helping us put on a great day. And with that, I want to just say hi. I'm Brian. I'm the president of the Colorado State Beekeeping Association, and I am excited to have a guest speaker today to talk about a topic that I've really enjoyed doing and have been some of my favorite videos that I've got to see him make. Jeff Horchoff, Mr. Ed, is a popular YouTube beekeeper. You may know him from tell me the name of the Abbey, Jeff.
St. Joseph
The
Abbey in
St.
Covington.
Joseph's Abbey in Covington, Louisiana. Jeff is the beekeeper for the Abbey there. He makes amazing YouTube videos focusing mostly on cutouts, but also has an amazing honey house with the Abbey and does great videos on beeswax. And for me, learning how to render beeswax, which is a difficult process, it's a multi-step process, it can be a messy process. Watching your videos, Jeff, has really helped me hone that process. So I've asked you to come on today and talk about your learnings along the way, some of what you started out doing as you processed beeswax, some of the lessons you've learned along the way, and some of the efficiencies that you learned as you started scaling up to process more and more beeswax. How you doing, Jeff?
I am awesome, Brian, and thank y'all so much for inviting me on this evening. Uh, I've been a beekeeper. I started in 1978, and it it was and when I moved from New Orleans back in 1978 to the North Shore, which is about 30 miles north of that. It was very rural in those days. So when I moved over, I said, you know what? I think I'm going to become a beekeeper when I move over there. So move from the big city into the rural area, become a
Hmm.
beekeeper. And my fascination and love for bees really began at that point. And for like most beekeepers, your origins are very humble and very minor, small. Um, and for most of us, we don't have the end picture of where we're going to wind up being. And certainly that was not the case for me. I had no idea that I would be keeping bees for a group of Benedictine monks, at an abbey. I mean, come on, who would even conceive of an idea like that? And yet, there it is. Truly, I am a blessed man, where my life has led me. And beekeeping has been with me, the whole way. And uh, I started off, in the beginning with very, three hives, and without any bit of knowledge about bees. I just said, I'm gonna get me some bees and I'm gonna start bees. And all I really knew at that point was that, you can have bees and you can get honey from them. I didn't know you could get anything else from bees but honey. Um, but it was a couple of years actually before I even got honey from my bees. And you know, the learning curve with bees is just every day you can learn something from every day. And here I am 45 years into my little journey, and every day I'm still learning stuff. They show me stuff that I just never saw before, and then I take that and I apply it to the practice. And mostly what I do, as you said earlier, Brian, is I do removals. Um, a little history on the beekeeping for the monks. Um, that gig, that job never started as anything. It started as a hobby for one of the monks that grew as bees do, because it's just a natural thing. Bees grow, and we had grown up to about 35 hives, and then we started in 2012, and by 2016 we're about to 35 hives, and and then in March of 2016 we had a major event, a flood, and it wiped out everything at the Abbey. So it was like a $35 million loss at the Abbey, and so we lost all our bees. So it was at that point I decided to um, go and start aggressively getting bees. In other words, doing removals. And so in the process of doing removals to build up our bee colonies again, we now are at like over 200 hives right now. So it's a lot more hives that I really want or need. And so it's just it's been a wonderful journey. But man, I've learned so much. One thing I also have to say about that, because I keep the bees for the monks, everything that you see on any of my videos, anything that I'm doing, it all belongs to the monks. All the bees, all the equipment, everything is the monks. And that's one great advantage that I have over 99% of hobby beekeepers, is that I don't own any of this stuff. You know, they own it. I spend their money and I buy it, but they own everything. And like you said before, our honey house, it was a long journey, 8, 9 years of getting the equipment to where we are. But we've got some really uh, more than just hobbyist equipment. I'm not going to say it's commercial, but it's definitely sideliner stuff. We can process, you know, 50 boxes of honey in about 2 hours. We can do that really well. And so when we're processing all this honey, it accumulates and builds up a lot of wax. And so one of my interests, years and years ago, I saw this, that we have um, the like it's a byproduct of keeping bees is this wax, and it's just like um, this cool stuff. Let me show you real quick here. I brought I brought a couple of samples of the wares
Mhm.
that we I produce over here at the Abbey, and this is probably about a 10-pound block of wax, and you can note the color of this, that yellow, almost school bus yellow. So this would be your brood cappings that make that block of wax like that, and then this this little gem right here,
Mm.
this white one, this is all from the cappings from our huntings when we do it. And the difference between the color is simply because the the whiter color, it hasn't had any use other than the storage of honey. So it's basically virgin wax. And so it doesn't have a lot of stuff in it. Whereas the brood wax has got a tremendous amount of stuff in it. Propolis, a lot of propolis, and just staining from the cocoons, and it just, but the color is absolutely stunning when you start out with all this nasty brown black comb, and you get a block of wax, that looks like that. But
Jeff, do you get a lot of wax from cutouts, and how does that color compare to what you just showed us?
so the cutout wax is going to always be the yellow wax. It'll always be yellow because I
Okay.
have so much brood wax
Yeah.
in there. And so that it's the only white wax is when I do our processing of the wax from our cappings off of the honeycomb. And
Got it.
we the one of one of the things that I do as a beekeeper that, and it's just a personal choice. I don't I don't like having our honey supers uh using nothing but brand new drawn out comb. I don't like having old brood comb used as honey supers. I get the bees to draw out new comb for their honey supers every year, and consequently, the wax is always that white color, and also the cappings that my uncapper produce. I have a Dakota Gunnis uncapper, a chain uncapper. So the difference between a chain uncapper and a knife uncapper, that basically the two types of uncapping devices, is that the knife uncapper gives you sheets of wax, or whereas a chain uncapper, because the process of removing the cappings, it's like they drag a piece of chain across the face of the comb, and so you get these tiny, tiny little dots of wax, and that wax is mixed in that honey as it goes through the uncapping machine, and then it's separated out in our uncapping tank and through the extractor as well. And all these things are I pump all this stuff into drums, and then I filter and strain all that stuff out. So the uncapping, the cappings that from our honey, it's always that brand new comb that's only, 3 months old. It's all brand new. And and it's one of the things I've learned how to do over the years, and I'll continue that practice of always using brand new foundation, brand new drawn out comb for our honey supers. I think the taste, the flavor of the honey is affected by having honey stored in comb that was formerly used as brood. It's just a personal preference. I don't, it's just me. That's just what I do. And there's nothing more beautiful, in my opinion, when you pull out a frame of brand newly drawn comb with capped with honey in it. It's just like the cat's meow when it comes to doing that. And I'm like a real proud daddy, holding up those frames, and plenty of my honey processing videos. I always put that shot in there because, man, it's just so beautiful. And I'm also thinking that, man, I'm gonna get some good wax out of this stuff too.
Sorry, I forgot to add this in the beginning, folks. Add your comments and questions throughout the conversation, and we'll make sure we address those
Oh,
as we keep
I'd love to
talking.
answer some questions. So I gotta let's go really back, Brian, to my early days, because if you look at
Yeah.
the equipment that I use now, it's not hobby stuff. It isn't. It's very expensive stuff. But I got a great story with that. I'll tell the story first. So I use a commercial grade um, kitchen kettle to render my beeswax. It's not an inexpensive piece of machinery. They're very expensive. However, they are expensive, but you can always, not always, but you can sometimes luck out and find these pieces of equipment being sold, as used kitchen equipment. So they are available out there for considerable cost. That brand new, these things can run 20 to $50,000. But the ones that I have in the honey house, I got these things right. Remember, I talked about the flood. Well, part of the flood was there was 4 feet of water in the kitchen. So everything in the kitchen, their kitchen is a commercial kitchen because they feed all the monks, the 30 something monks, as well as 100 and 120 seminarians. So they need to have a big kitchen, and the entire kitchen was underwater. So all of their cooking equipment was um
I don't know. Did you freeze there, Jeff? That I think we lost him there. Having a little technology problems, folks. Let's see if Jeff
Hopefully he's not underwater.
can.
Oh, you're muted, Jeff.
all right, how's that?
You're good.
Okay, sorry. I don't know what
No
happened.
worries. Yeah, no worries.
But the kitchen equipment was all trash. So I was working on trying to salvage whatever I could down at the honey house, and I was driving by the back of the kitchen, and they had brought all of the kitchen equipment out on the street to just haul away. And I saw these two kettles out there, and I said, there ain't no way that I'm gonna let these things go. And so I got my little bug in my trail, and I loaded these two 30-gallon kitchen kettles on my trail, and nobody said anything. So, they must have figured, well, he must have had permission. That's one thing. It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. So I just loaded these things on the trailer, and I took them back to the honey house, and I refurbished them. I had them refurbished. It cost like $300 to refurbish both of these machines. And
Wow.
so I got these really expensive machines that are just phenomenal as far as processing wax. And for nothing. So that's the story of. But when I first began processing wax, and I remember when I first was keeping bees, and I would get the cappings from the wax, but I didn't even know what to do with it. I used to save, and of course I didn't have very many hives, so it's not like you really get a lot of wax. So I would save all of my wax in the freezer that I had in the garage. And I wound up with a bag of about 30 pounds or so of this wax over a couple of years. And I had no idea how to process it or make use of it. So I wound up giving it away. That's the last time I ever gave wax away. So what I started doing research on how you can clean up beeswax. And there's a lot of now that back then, that this is back in the probably in the early 2010s, sometime around that area. And there wasn't a lot of stuff about how you can go about doing it. I had seen some videos about guys using steam, and I explored all these possibilities because it just fascinated me that this nasty stuff, you could transform it into something that is now usable again for your bees. And I tried steam. That was one of the things I tried, and I could never get anything hot enough. It would melt it, but it would never purify it. And so that I just didn't have the ability to make it that part go any further. But there's a lot of very interesting ways of using steam to render wax. One of the most interesting videos I ever saw about it, I think it was a guy in Kentucky. He would stack his supers up, I don't know, 8, 10, 12, 15 of them at a time, full of old dead out comb frames and everything. And he had I think it was a welding tank that he put over just some burning logs, and he ran some piping into the bottom of these bee boxes, and it would build up. He put water in that tank, and he would boil that water, and it would push the steam inside of the pipe into the bottom of the boxes, and it would create such pressure, hot steam and pressure, that it would just melt everything in the box. And he's getting these blobs of the yellow beeswax. And I was just fascinated by that. And I said, man, I gotta be able, I want to be able to do that. I never could do it. And now I'm sure that video is still, you probably could still find that video out there. It was just fascinating. It was just a country guy, and he was rendering beeswax. He was doing a great job. Steam just wasn't going to work for me. So I don't remember how I got to the process of it, but here in Louisiana, we're really big on cooking things on burners, on you know, crawfish, shrimp, crabs. We're big on using burners. So everybody's got a big pot, and everybody's got a burner. I said, well, let me see if I can maybe try it that way, just throwing the wax into this water and boiling it and seeing what happens. And that's really how I first started out. I had a 5-gallon soup pot and a burner, and I would just cook the wax, and it would all melt down, and I'd get this pot of nasty, nasty looking stuff. But underneath or in between all that nasty stuff, there was wax. So it got to be the problem of, well, how do you figure out getting that hot wax out of all that nasty stuff that's in that pot as well? And therein lies the trick of the whole matter, is how do we separate the good stuff from the bad stuff, and then wind up with, you know, a refined block of wax. And so I tried all kind of stuff. I said, well, maybe I remember I used mosquito screen. I first tried that, and just like I would, and it was the fiberglass mosquito screen, and I would cut it a circle and drape it over my pot of water, wax, trash, and I'd use a ratchet strap and ratchet the screen on it, and then I would pour it out. You know, it's like it's a disaster, but it worked. You know, like, well, look, here's your rudimentary. You're starting to get wax. You know, we just got to get this process down a little bit better. And I did. I can't remember exactly the all the methods that I was trying, because I was trying anything just to find a way to get as much wax out of that garbage that's floating on top of the wax and water. So I think it was right after I got the kettles. I said, I think that's what it all started. I said, I bet you I can use these kettles to do some rendering some wax. And that's, I think, how it all started. I had one of the kettles in one of the buildings, and I've got videos showing me rendering wax in the old mechanic building. Those are early days, and man, I was like proud as could be to get these big blocks of wax. And it's like, man, but I still wasn't there because I was still losing so much wax in the process. I was even at one point um, using a fish frying basket. Uh, after all the stuff had melted down, I would use a fish basket and I scoop out all of the cappings that were floating on top of all this stuff. And then I would put that in a separate container, let it strain out. And it worked, but I was still losing so much wax because when I get rid of all the junk after it hardened, there's still so much yellow up in there. And it's like, oh no, it's just that's just not gonna work. And and then I had the idea of using 1/8-inch hardware cloth, forming a basket that would conform to the shape of my kettle and putting everything in this basket because it's huge. I mean, it's about that big, and I didn't have any kind of container that would fit it. So I said, well, let me make something. So I tried using 1/8-inch hardware cloth, and I put it in there, and then I put all the wax and all that stuff inside of the hardware cloth, and I melted it. And then I said, if I could just pick it up, then I could just, everything was strained through. It worked, but you talk about a mess. Because when you lift that stuff up, all that wax is just dripping down, splashing up. It's a disaster. It's just a disaster. It worked, and I was able to uh, get less wasted wax, but there was still a lot of wax. Because the problem is that the temperature drops so fast as the cappings cool that it traps the wax in there. So there had to be a way where I could keep the cappings warm enough so that the trap wax, the small amount of wax, could still get through them, where I could then capture that. That is the challenge right there, is at least in the process that I'm using, that was the challenge. And so I tried 3 or 4 different ways of trying to contain the wax, the cappings, and to separate the wax from it. And I really don't remember the exact when that epiphany happened. But I will say this, I get I get a lot of epiphanies while I'm at prayer. So every morning, I pray with the monks every morning, and when I have these things in my mind, I bring that to prayer with me, and I don't remember exactly how it happened, but somehow or another, the idea came to me that said, don't try to capture that mass of cappings, cocoons, all that trash. Don't try to trap it out. Rather, just trap it, period, to leave it inside of the kettle. So then I started working on ways of just preventing all that stuff from coming out of the gate of the kettle. And that is one of the big advancements of using a kettle as opposed to a bucket. Being able to drain the liquid out of the container. That's very important, that you can drain the liquid, because if you can drain the liquid, then you can contain the mass that the wax is in there. So it's a big step up from a bucket to some kind of container that you're able to drain out. Now, some of the wax separators that are out there, they use a system of valves where because wax floats on water, they use a system of valves or gates that you can drain out water until wax comes out. There's a number of ways of doing it, but to me, that's very complicated. And then again, you lose wax doing that. So my idea was if I could just control that waste to keep it from coming out and let the wax come out, that is simple, and I think it is a doable thing. So I tried to block the entrance of the gate where all the liquid comes out, tried to block it, um, and it worked. The problem is that eventually you have to remove that screen to let the rest of the stuff come through, and you have issues with that. So it worked, but not to the degree that I wanted. And so the real game changer came for me was instead of trying to create something to hold the stuff back, the throat that is in this kettle, it's a big throat. It's about 2 inches, and it's very deep, about 6 inches. So what I came up with is instead of trying to keep the hardware cloth inside of the kettle, why don't I just get a little piece and stick it inside of the throat? And so that's what I did. I curled up a section of the hardware cloth, crimped it off at the end, and I stuck it into the whole throat of the gate and closed it off at the end, so the stuff no longer can get through. It's closed off. The only problem that you have is that eventually all that stuff clogs up your screen. So you have to clean it off a little bit. But it actually works to my benefit at that point, at least having the type of kettle that I have, because the kettle, it's a water jacketed kettle. In other words, you have an interior bucket and then an exterior skin, and the space between the interior and exterior, that space is filled with water, and that water is what's heated by a bunch of burners underneath, and once it's heated, it holds that temperature for a very long time, hours, it'll hold the temperature. And that's where I really I take advantage of that now. And it was something that I observed through observing that I learned how to do it. And I actually talk about it on the video that I just posted on wax rendering last week, I think, that the mass of cocoons that are still inside of the kettle, I allow that stuff just to sit for an hour, and it will eventually drain down enough that it starts to dry up, and then I can push that clump of cocoons up, and in the bottom of that kettle, it's got a taper on it. So I push the stuff up, and all the wax that is still in there can still filter down through the hot wax, because the kettle is still, I don't know what the temperature is, 100, 150 degrees. It's still warm enough that it's keeping the mass of cocoons and junk warm, and the wax still percolates through all that stuff, gets down to the bottom of the kettle, and then runs out. And I describe and show that process, I think, pretty thoroughly on the video that I just posted on that. And by doing that, there is virtually no wax left in the cocoon mass that is left. When it used to be that I would have so much wax in that cocoon mass that I used to use that wax as fire starters, because you could just take a mat and light it and it would just burn due to the wax that was still in it. And the wax held everything together, and it burned very, very well. I mean, it's a candle basically. And but that distressed me, that I'm losing all that wax. I want that wax. And So now I can, with using the kettle, the refuge that I now get out, I can take it and break it with my hand, and there is no visible wax in there. I'm sure there's wax still in it, but for the most part, I would say 98% of the wax that was in whatever comb that went in the kettle is now in a block, that I'm trying to save. So the process over the years really has gone developed, and I think I've refined it now, at least for my needs and what I need. It's as far as I need to go, because I'm very, very, very happy about what comes out at the end of the process. So that's really the whole process of how I do that thing.
All
But
right, I'm gonna circle back. Well, go ahead, share what you want, and then I want to
yeah,
circle
no,
back and
I
hit on
just,
some
I mean, come
questions.
on, who wouldn't
I
love,
know. I
you know,
love
come
that.
on.
I agree. I agree. And that's part of why, getting 90% of that beeswax out is pretty easy, but that last 10%, that's the hardest part. And
It
as a
is.
beekeeper, you know how important that resource is and you want to be able to do it. And but not give up and be like, throw out all the slum gum with the whatever beeswax. You want to get as much of it as you can. So I want to go back to like a little bit more of a smaller scale.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of things that you use to strain. The main idea of separating out the awesome beeswax from the trash, the
Right.
stuff you don't want it to be. You talked about mosquito netting. You talked about 1/8-inch hardware cloths. What are other materials you've used in that process to try to get out
Uh,
the junk?
I've I've tried a lot. I've tried cheesecloth. I've tried pillowcases. I've tried t-shirts. Uh, uh, Off the top of my head, I know those three. And again, they are effective, but you leave so much wax in this stuff, and it's like, no, I don't want to do that. It's not worth it to me. There's other ways of doing it for sure. um I think steam is really a very, very good option. uh it's just not a very good option for most beekeepers. Now, I do have a suggestion though for most beekeepers, particularly hobbyist beekeepers, and I recommend it extremely highly, and that is solar wax melters. They
Yeah,
are so effective, and they really do cater to the hobbyists, because most hobbyists don't have a lot of beeswax. And so the small amount of wax that you do get, you can process, and then you can actually use it. And I had gotten a solar wax melter from Hilco, and I think it was like $150, something like that. And that son of a gun worked beautiful. I mean, beautiful. Uh, I I did a video on it, and I got some absolutely stunning wax out of it. I mean, with no cleaning or anything, it was just beautiful wax. So I would highly recommend for hobbyists to either build their own solar wax melter or buy one, if they don't have the skills to do it. But there are lots of YouTube videos out there showing how to build a solar wax melter. And the what the tools that you use to do it, or the material that you use to make it, it's your imagination is what limits it. Ice chests, boxes, it's just anything, you know. Uh, they're just a wonderful tool. The problem for most is that they can't handle a lot of wax, and you need
yep.
to have bright sunshine. Well, I mean, Colorado, you got lots of sunshine up there.
We got lots of sunshine, but it's our
Good.
solar wax melter season is coming to an end for the year.
Yeah, correct,
Hey,
correct.
Jack mentioned something that I wanna kinda play on. He
Okay.
says, "I used paper towels to filter the beeswax and then use the paper towels for fire starters." Let me add on to that. That's a great idea. I spent one winter filtering out a whole bunch of beeswax, and those paper towels would accumulate beeswax, and I would just store them in a bucket. And then when it got warm enough, all those paper towels went into my solar wax melter the next spring. And I was able to use that wax melter to get all that residual beeswax out of those paper towels. And you could still use them as fire starters. So I just wanted to add on to that piece a little bit. Eric
I I
says,
would use
yeah,
I would use the paper towels in the solar wax to
yep,
hold back the debris
yeah,
because
absolutely.
otherwise it will filter down into your wax. So you got to
Yep.
block it some kind of way.
And then Eric says, "Did I hear you say that you always use fresh foundation in your honey supers?"
That is correct. So every year I spend a lot of money on frames and foundation uh, because it's just me. I want our honey to be drawn on brand new foundation with brand new wax. So I buy um, triple coated wax foundation frames, and that's what I use. Now, also, what I do is any of my foundations that I put out prior year, and I'm actually going to be shooting video on this when I get back next week. Um, the honey supers that I had put out that the bees never drew comb on, this it's all new frames and foundation, but it has to be refreshed. I'm not gonna put a last year's wax foundation out. I want new wax on it. So this is what I use um my wax for is I use the kettle again and I melt literally 100, 120, 140 pounds of wax in there. And I dip all of my foundations in this wax. And there's a lot of people will say, well, you got putting too much on. I don't care. The bees will use it or not. But I'd rather put the wax on the foundation than have the bees have to make the wax themselves because I'm told it's 7 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. Well, I'd rather have the honey than the wax. So I'll give them the wax because I can do that, and then I'll take that 7 pounds of honey that would have gone into the wax production. So I that's it's just what I do, my way of doing it.
And then to add on to that, any frames, and you do all deeps, your brood chambers and your honey supers,
Correct.
anything that you spin out this year is brand new wax, and then those frames become brood frames for the next year.
That has been my practice. However, I'm changing it up this year, Brian.
Oh,
We always want to do something different to see how it
yeah,
works.
yeah,
So what I'm doing this year, uh, I've got 90 boxes, 95 boxes of drawn comb, right? And
yep,
normally I would use that in my brood production for when I do my splits, that would then become the brood box. But
right,
I'm always I'm always putting more um, boxes on there with wax dip foundation in there. I'm always doing that anyway because I've got more hives. I've got more than 95 hives. I'll be doing more
mhm,
than 95 splits. So I'm always doing it anyway. So what I decided this year was that those 95 boxes with drawn comb on it, what I'm going to be doing next year is those boxes with the drawn comb are going to become my honey supers for next year. I'm only going to be putting 9 frames instead of 10 frames in there. So I'll increase the honey production that way. And then for my brood production, I'm dropping on boxes with new new wax, new foundation on for the bees to dry it out. So you remember, you know that in the early spring when we're doing our splits, it is the time when the bees are drawing out the wax, the best time, because you got your good nectar flow. It's the best time for wax production. Now, I don't feed my bees, so I have to go with, what nature is providing. So for me, it's springtime is the best time to draw out comb. So when I drop these brood boxes with just foundation, with heavily waxed foundation on them, they're not going to have any problem drawing these things out and for these things to become uh, brood boxes. In the nectar flow, when I'm putting these things out as honey supers, they can draw out a full 10 frame deep box in 10 days. So it's not like it's an unreasonable expectation of me to put these boxes of heavily waxed foundation on top of a new split and have them draw that comb out in time for them to be able to use that. So it's just something I'm trying this year. I know it's going to work, and I
Yeah.
think I might get a little bit more honey production as well.
And that's what I've loved about getting to meet beekeepers from across the country is you have a different situation than us. Your flow, your season is so much longer.
Right.
I'm not sure that that is a strategy that would work in a shorter season for many Coloradan beekeepers, but you've learned what your nectar flow will give you, and you're working with that part of nature to kind of develop a management strategy that works for how you want to build out your frames. I want to go back to water and wax. There's a
Okay.
really important relationship in using water when processing wax. Talk about the temperature of water. Talk about other times where you're not using water in rendering beeswax.
When it's rendering beeswax, I'll always have water in it. I'll always use water. You need water to create that separation. You have if you don't have the separation, well, you're not going to be able to get your wax clean. So the water, any dense material, dirt, propolis, the heavy stuff falls through the water layer, falls through the wax, and then it falls through the water. And that's why you get this dirt that comes out because it all falls through. Now, the cocoons and anything that's lighter than wax is going to be floating on the top. So you get your cocoons and junk on the top, you get your wax underneath that, and then underneath the wax, it's water. And so that's why all this stuff just percolates down through the trash, through the wax, through the water, and at the bottom. So this is how you start creating the refining of the wax is by using water. You have to use water. There's no doubt, in my mind at least. You've got to use water. The only time that I don't use water is when in years past, I don't do it anymore because now I even use water for this process. Is when I'm waxing my foundation. When
Mm.
I wax foundation, I've got old videos on me doing this because I don't do that process anymore. We have too many hives, so it's not efficient for me to do it that way. I would use a crock pot and I would just break up my blocks of wax and melt them in the crock pot, and I'd fill that crock pot, just full of wax, hot wax. And then I'd use a 4-inch foam roller, dip it in that, and then roll that out on my foundation, flip it over and do the other side. And and it's very, very efficient. That's a really great way to do it, if you got 10, 15 hives. But when you're dealing with 150, 200 hives, you have to have something different. So my process evolved for that. And so again, I use my kettle. Now, the idea of rolling, using a foam roller to put wax on foundation, it's good, if you're dealing with the small amounts, but if you've got 1,500 frames to do, it's just not a job that you're going to want to do it like that. So I saw a video a couple years ago. It was this, somebody came up with this idea that and I never really did understand it. I just understood the concept. They had a container that was heated with wax and water in it, and they would dip a sheet of foundation in it and pull it out, and it would cover the wax. Wax would cover both sides of the foundation at the same time. And I'm thinking, well, that's pretty cool, but you have to have something really deep to do it, and you have to have a way of keeping that water wax hot so that you can dip your foundation. And I said, well, you know what? I got a kettle. Why can't I use my kettle? So that is where the kettle really does shine, because it's a 30-gallon kettle. So it's deep enough. It's probably about 14 inches deep. And you know how deep a frame is? Like 14 inches. It's just like perfect. So what I do is I put about it's probably about 20 gallons of water in the kettle, and then I float about 100 and something pounds of wax on top of that. I just melt it all down. Now, what you create is about a layer of about 5 inches of solid wax, right? But it's liquefied. And what's really cool about the process is when you take your foundation and you push it through that layer of wax, it goes through the layer of wax, and then it hits that layer of water. Well, wax is not going to stick to water, but water doesn't stick to wax either. So you push through that layer of wax into layer of water till the top of the foundation is now completely immersed into the wax, and you pull it out. And as you pull it out, the water is repelled off the foundation and the wax sticks to it. So in one motion, you do two sides of a foundation. It's just phenomenal. And I can do about 300 foundations in about an hour and a half. It's like, it's so fast. And it's the equipment, it's the equipment that does it. So that's what I do. I separate my foundation, I break it apart, and I'll be showing this on video within the next, couple of weeks. I'll be showing this process, because I take advantage of the cool weather to work out in the into where the kettle room is, because it's always hot in there. And I'll do this whole process of refurbishing the foundation so that come springtime, it's really for us, by the end of February, I'm already doing my splits and kneading foundation, wax foundation. So wax is such a valuable asset to beekeepers, and so I cherish it. I'm asked all the time, Mr. Ed, do you sell wax? No, I don't sell it, because I need it, and truthfully, I couldn't sell it for what in good conscience. It takes me so much work to process this thing. I don't see how guys sell wax for $10 a pound, because it's such an involved process. And so I don't sell wax.
I agree completely. And it's such a special product. You can use it to make other things and sell those products if you're interested in making money for way more than $10 a pound. So
Right.
beeswax melts around 145 degrees, Jeff.
Correct.
Talk about the temperature of water and what's an ideal temperature to work with beeswax? Are there ever like, is there a too hot temperature? Is there any bad choices as far as temperature?
Oh, I'm probably not the guy that you should ask that question to because I'm pretty bad about regulating temperature. Very often when I go in there and I show it in my videos, the water is boiling. So that's 212 degrees, right? Um, to me, that's no big deal because on its own, 100, 212 degrees is too much for wax, but you're not talking about just wax. It's in water. So I have never burned wax in water. Never, never. Um, I know you could burn it, if it's just if you got it too high. I think 160 degrees is where it starts to burn off at 160, I think. I know it melts at 145. Um, the other thing about wax, it's very, very, very flammable. And that's one of the things that you have to really be careful about when you're working with a boiler with the pot on top of it. You don't want this thing to boil over and the wax, which is on the top, is going to come out. You can get go really bad really quick with wax. And it's not a fire that goes out very easy. One
Yeah.
I was made aware of this when we were uh, dipping our boxes in paraffin, the dangers of overspill with paraffin because it's like these fires are incredibly hot, and it's not simply like putting water on it to put it out because they were already in water, and it's just not going
Yeah.
to put them out. So you do have to exercise caution when you are doing this for sure. Now, one of the safe things of using that kettle that I have, it's water jacketed, so it's not gonna I don't have that danger of spilling over and creating a fire like that.
Um, I wanna caution people, oftentimes you might be tempted to use the oven as a place to render beeswax, and it might look tempting, but I think problems like what Jeff is talking about are ripe if you're gonna use your oven to try to work with beeswax. I definitely suggest an outside place or a shop area or something a little bit more protected. Like you said, beeswax definitely flammable and not easy to put out. Do you have any horror show stories, any cautionary tales, Jeff, you want to kind of
Well,
end
I
with?
want to add to what you're saying about the oven aspect. Anytime you use any equipment for wax, that's all you're ever going to use it for again because it's ruined
Yeah.
for anything
Yeah.
else, which is another reason you don't want to put it in your oven because
Yeah.
it's ruined. That's it. I always say that the crock pots that I use to um, uh, melt the wax into when I would spread it on the foundation, I always say that those crock pots will never cook another red bean in its life. It's
Hmm.
finished.
Yep.
Now,
I have upon occasion taken something from our kitchen to use in our beeswax operation, and then the next thing I do is go right to the store and buy a replacement for that and put it in the kitchen, and then that
that's
one becomes
true.
bee
That's
stuff.
true. Yeah, it's once it's used for wax, that's the only thing it's going to ever be used for after that.
Yeah.
I
Alright,
really
defi
don't have any horror stories about wax. I
good.
really don't. Yeah, I'm very happy about that. Uh, and I'm very happy about the end product of the work that I do to achieve these blocks of wax. It's just beautiful. And I know KT, who's a member of the Colorado Club, she actually is a judge. She's a honey judge and a wax judge, and that's what I'm really proud about the fact that there is absolutely no blemishes on this KT.
Yeah.
It's like this is what we're looking for when we're judging. judging that stuff.
It is such a pretty color. Hey, Jeff, I want to honor your time. What's next for you? Where are you at home now? Or are you on the
Yeah,
road?
I'm at
And where are
home.
you going?
I'm leaving to go to Florida. I'll be speaking to the West Palm Beach Club in Florida on Friday, and then Saturday we're going out to one of their yards, and we're going to be doing an inspection in their yards on Saturday. So it ought to be a great trip. Looking forward to that one.
All right, I'm sorry you're coming in and out. I didn't hear a word of where you're going next, but it looked exciting.
Well, Mr. Ed's always on the run and having fun.
Right on. Well, Jeff, I will see you at the Bee Expo in
Looking
January
forward.
for
Yeah,
sure. If you're going
yeah,
to go to the Bee Expo, you'll definitely see Jeff Horchoff, Mr. Ed. Mr. Ed is your handle on YouTube. Is that
yeah,
right? You're
correct. You can find me, Mr. Ed and Bees. That's all you have to look for, or my name, Jeff Harchoff Bees.
right on, Jeff. So great seeing you. Have a great night. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise with Colorado beekeepers around beeswax. We really
You're very
appreciate
welcome,
you.
Brian. Brian, and thank you very much for inviting me and asking me on.
You bet. We'll see you soon.
God bless, brother.
All right. Take care.